Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Nan Simonsen. I am the author of Aging Powerfully. Do you know what I've done today? I'm celebrating the end of tax season. Doesn't that sound strange? But my husband's a CPA and tax attorney, and he has been working 6 days a week, getting home late, much later than we like to have our meals. And today it's it. Ta-da! We're going out to lunch with the staff, and so I dressed in my power color. And yeah, that's that. Anyway, glad to have you here today. We're talking about a serious subject, and it's a subject that um, affected me for a good part of my life, and that's food addiction. And there are still those in the medical field that say that food addictions are impossible. We can't be addicted to food. Well, we're talking today about food that isn't really food. We're talking about food that is chemicals. In other words, processed food, especially ultra processed foods, are addictive because they're not real food. They're not what our body knows to do anything with, and they don't know, and our body has no idea, not only no idea how to process it in a healthy way, because you can't, but also our microbiome is damaged by processed foods. So we're going to talk about processed foods today. I posted on Facebook and in a number of places, I believe even on Instagram, a recommendation to you that I'm going to repeat, and that is that you consider watching the video of Chef AJ, who she has become someone I have grown in admiration for just tremendously. And I always had admired what she had done, but this last year, actually, since COVID began, 2020, in March, I believe it was March 20th, she began interviewing people. And it was 1 to 2 to 3 times a day, every day. She didn't miss, into this year as well, 2021. And I love her interviews. She is very good with the questions. Quite often, we all get stuck with this. We will listen to somebody talk, and we're formulating our next statement rather than really hearing what they're saying. She doesn't do that, clearly, because what she comes back with in terms of a question is spot on. So she was interviewing Joan Nifland, Nifland, who wrote a book. I can't show it to you because I just heard about it, and it's a textbook. It's, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of words, but it's a thick textbook. She's a professor, Dr. Nifland, and it's called Processed Food Addiction. It took her 3 years to write this book. She had 20 or 2,000 sources. I'm reading from my notes. 1,300 studies on, and so this is very scientific. She is a scientist, and so none of this is about her opinion. It was about her deep dive into whether or not food can be addictive. If so, what foods are addictive? And then what we can ultimately do about that. So this video, this interview with Chef AJ, was a little less than an hour, was just seminal. And the answer is heck yes. Food can be addictive if it's not real food, i.e. processed food. So how did we get in this place? Because she made a comment that I'll read to you. How did we get into this place in the first place? She wrote, well, processed food isn't food. Oh, and this interview that Chef AJ did was preempted by a teenager's desire to write a term paper. And the term paper, a project, a research project in high school, was they were given the directive to write about an injustice in America. And she chose the processed food industry and the possible addictiveness of those foods. And that was an injustice in America. Isn't that wonderful? All over that. What Joan wrote about processed foods, well, first of all, is that they are absolutely addictive, and that the processed food industry, oh, this was the mic drop. She said the processed food industry is not only responsible for the failing of health in America because of the addictive properties of processed food, but she said they created the obesity epidemic in America. 70% of Americans are overweight. They're not people with no character or no ability to control themselves, or that just make bad decisions. Everything about our life today, think about it, is pretty much directed by instructions everywhere we look, in magazines, on billboards, on television, or any media advertisements, directing us toward food and behaviors that have to do that are around food. And what are those foods? Most of them are takeout food, which is processed foods. I use this as an example because when I read this, I just about fell off a chair. That the buns, the hamburger buns that McDonald's uses, have 31 ingredients in them. Now that's impossible. It should be impossible. Bread is flour, maybe salt, and yeast and water. 31 ingredients means you have stabilizers, emulsifiers, chemicals, salt, oil, sugar, everything that sets a person up to love that so much that they can't say no. Well, processed food is heavily tied in to the fast food industry. Everything there, that's the point of it. Everything there comes packaged, prepared, ready to throw in fat, oil, and quite often trans fats, even though they've been eliminated supposedly from our diet. That's not necessarily the case. In that oil can be, even if it's not heavily hydrogenated, it can become rancid just by using it again and again and again at high heats. So the point is, most of us, I don't anymore. And that's where the change began in my body. That changed everything in my life. But most of us have integrated our lives around driving through and picking up fast food, or going into the store and buying things that are quick and easy. For our kids, we buy packaged things. They may say organic, they may say healthy, but read the ingredients. There is always, almost always, and I'm going to say probably always, a component of fat, oil, of salt, oil, and sugar. That combination, which we don't find in nature, a food that has a combination of fat and oil and sugar, that combination can be fine-tuned to the degree that when we begin eating it, we can't stop. Let me tell you a little bit more about what food addiction, how well planned it was in America. And this is from my notes on the podcast. Of course, I listened to it. Well, I don't know if you know this, but every morning I'm either on my bike for an hour and 15 minutes, driving on what we call the river bottom and around a park of ours that has several lakes and a lot of wild birds and things. It's called Fairmont Park here in Riverside, California. Or I go up a nearby, I'll call it a hill, but we call it a mountain. I think I don't know how high it is. Anyway, not that high, but high enough for about a 4-mile trail around it. And that's called Mount Rubidoux. And for that entire hour, I always listen to a podcast. Why not? Why not spend an hour breathing in the air, looking at nature, but also gaining an education? I did that while I was training for my my coaching certification. I could get in a lot of training while I was simply on the mountain. Anyway, so of course I listened then. That's when I first heard it. And I had a different subject planned for today. And I said, no, no, let's just bring this all out on the table. And of course I listened again. So what Dr. Niflin was talking about as it relates to the food industry is she said that they began understanding the power they had over our palates way back in the 1970s when one of the or when the tobacco companies purchased a Hawaiian punch drink and decided to change it from a bar mixer. You put alcohol, it's sweet, now you've got a cocktail, to marketing it to children. They simply marketed it to children with this cute little, it was Hawaiian punch with this cute little figurine that they had all over in advertisements. The kids went nuts, and that's when they realized, wait a minute, we could get people hooked. We can especially start early with kids, and we can sell like crazy. That was the first. By the middle 1980s, the tobacco industry had bought Kraft, Nabisco, and General Foods. So they were in control of this huge portion of the manufacturers of the foods that, think about what these food companies represented. They were our cereals, they were our snacks, they were our crackers and our breads. I mean, it goes on, and they knew what they were doing because they hired a man named Moskowitz. What's his first name? Howard Moskowitz, and he's in his 90s, but he still will help corporations create addictive foods. That's still what he does. So there were the 5 A's of addictive foods, and they were: advertise them heavily everywhere you look. The name, the logo, the irresistibility of the product. Lay's potato chips, bet you can't eat just one. Make them available everywhere. Fast food has a sideline of whatever this snack is. Make them available in school. In other words, subsidize certain things that make them not only cheap, but also make them available everywhere. Affordability is how they become cheap. You know, and I know, that our commodities, our agricultural commodities, are subsidized so that fast food can use the wheat, can use the corn, can use the soy. I love soy. I have tofu all the time, but it's organic soy, not grown to be used for cheap oils, so that they can make foods that are, again, highly addictive. So availability, advertise like crazy, affordability, addictive properties, and that's where the sinister nature comes in. As a matter of fact, the words they used were ruthless, merciless, and capable of creating massive numbers of addicted people in our population, because they hire chemists to come up with combinations of these elements in our food that make people incapable of, or render people incapable of not stopping. So if you've ever had a binge, I know I have, if you've ever had a binge and you haven't been able to stop, sometimes it's because you were engineered to do that with this. They hire chemists who put together these foods, and you've probably heard me say this before, and it's the truth, and they use brain scanners, like MRIs, to look for the bliss points where the brain lights up in an addictive way, where the brain lights up with these combinations that they then put into the foods, knowing that when people start eating those foods, they're not going to want anything else. And then finally, age. They go for the young, they get them hooked. Mom, I want this. Mom buys it, and it's there for the family, and those kids eat those foods in lieu of real food. I had my grandkids over, well, I had the family over for Easter, and I worry so much about these things because busy moms will have in their cupboards foods that the kids can just go to. They're usually processed foods, but they're the healthier ones, the ones that you'll see on the shelves and you'll think, oh, well, this will be fine. The kids just keep helping themselves. The problem is when the kids eat those kinds of foods, I'm going to say us, when we eat those kinds of foods, guess what doesn't taste good? Real food doesn't taste good. So I fretted and fretted for the week before they came, thinking, what am I going to do? Because my husband and I are whole food plant based. I wasn't going to bring in meats to the house. And I thought, how am I going to feed them and what am I going to do? So I made a number of things like some, brunch was easy because I could do whole grain pancakes and I could do, I did sausages, breakfast sausages from a recipe of Tammy of Nutmeg Notebook. Look for Tammy of Nutmeg Notebook, Chef AJ, Crocs in the Kitchen. They're all whole food people that come up with fabulous foods, and they have hundreds and hundreds of not only recipes, but of videos showing you how to make this happen, how to transition, and all of that. Anyway, and I made these breakfast sausages, and the entire meal was plant-based, and the kids loved it. And they loved these cookies. I thought there's no way they're going to eat my muffins and cookies. But I don't have anything else in the house. The most processed thing I bought, and it was hard for me to do it, but I did it, was popcorn. Bag of organic popcorn. And they actually liked my muffins, and they liked my my cookies, which were chocolate chip, walnut, oat, and some dates, and a bunch of banana. And that was it. That was the cookie. And they actually liked them. So it showed me that we can overcome a palate that is trained on, let's say, snack foods that are highly addictive. Yeah, but it's a little bit harder because there are still things that we all want that we get used to that are so highly concentrated in flavors and fats and sugars and oils and all that it's hard to appreciate anything else. As I've said before, if you feed somebody apple fritters, they'll look at an apple like it's a foreign object. If people eat fried zucchini from the drive-through, a piece of steamed zucchini is going to be as foreign to them as chewing cardboard. We have to neuroadapt. We have to get used to real foods again, and we'll talk about that later. But these are the things that we have to understand. That yes, processed food, especially ultra processed. What's ultra processed food? Ultra processed food is when you look at the food and you can't even identify where it came from. Think of that bag, and I was looking for baked chips in a health food store. It's called Clark's near me, because I thought, well, I'll just bake some tortilla chip, or I'll buy some tortilla chips that are baked, and then I'll make a bunch of guacamole for the kids for snacks because they were here for several days. And the only thing I saw baked, and it was healthy, whole grain. Well, it wasn't whole grain. I looked at the back of it, and it started out with tapioca starch. And that's fine. Tapioca is not a bad thing. But when you strip it of all of its nutrients and all you're using is what they call the endosperm, which is just the starchy part, there's nothing there that's real about that. And it's certainly not identifiable. So ultra processed food is the food that you can't even identify. That the thing that it was those puffs, like cheese puffs, and it was a vegetable puff that was supposed to be healthy for you. That was all I could find that was baked. So I baked my own tortilla chips without oil, and it worked out beautifully. I have a Breville smart air fryer that you can just lay them out in, and I just did several batches, and they liked my chips. And anyway. So it is possible. Oh, how sweet. My daughter is on, and she said the sauce, and she was here. My husband's youngest daughter, but she's almost 29. When I say but, I mean she's youngest, but still an adult. And she wrote, the sausages were amazing. I highly recommend them. And you can find them. It's Tammy's Nutmeg Notebook, or just Nutmeg Notebook, and it was her breakfast sausages. And they were oats and lots of seasonings, and yeah, they were really, really good. Okay, Nan, stay on focus. So, let me tell you a little bit more about this. Plants have natural endorphins. Our bodies were designed to overeat when we can, to eat the highest calorie foods we can, and this is back in our evolutionary days, because that's what kept us alive, and to eat, period. And so we get endorphins when we eat. It makes us feel good besides just the flavor of the food. It makes us want to eat so that we can stay, again, alive. However, all of this isn't necessary in our environment because we have plenty of food. We have more concentrated calorie foods than we could ever need. And that's one of the reasons that when I cook, if you've listened to any of my cooking videos, you will see that I normally have SOS free or low, salt, oil, sugar free. I don't use sugar. If I'm going to sweeten something, it's going to be with date paste, which is just dates that are soaked and whirled up in the blender with some water. And that's a fruit that has been made into a paste, and it's very sweet. But you still have the nutrients, you still have the fiber and the vitamins and minerals of it. Oil, I almost always use no oil at all. Everything I make, I saute with a broth, and it's delicious. My food is very good. And the salt, I may use a little bit of salt, but salt can really hijack our tongue. For example, when I make my tortilla chips and they have no salt on them, you'll eat a few. And I did this at first when I was transitioning to whole food plant-based because I thought it was necessary that our food was a little closer to what we were used to. You go to, for example, Chipotle. That's one fast food place I'll go because I can get beans. The rice is full of oil, but I can get black beans, pinto beans, sofritas, which is the soy, shredded soy, tofu. And then a bunch of their sauteed, but they're just grilled sauteed fajitas, which are the chopped up vegetables, and then pico de gallo, and then masses of lettuce. So it's a big old salad, and that's it. None of the sour cream, none of the cheese, none of the meat. So that's one place you can go. But we always got one bag of chips. Well, the chips are addictive because why? Salt, oil, and you can bet they put a little bit of sugar in there too. Bits of sugar make things especially delicious. Look on packages. You're going to see all kinds of forms of sugar on just about anything, including baby food. Anyway, and so at first I would spray a little bit of oil on my hand. I have an oil spray ball that go like this, and then pat my chips and then put a little salt on them. That was my teeny cheat. Well, we could eat those until they're all gone. Everything I made would be gone. However, if I don't put the oil and the salt on it, they'll last. We'll have several, enough to really enjoy our meal as we dip up my black beans and vegan cheese sauce or vegan sour cream, but we won't eat them all. That's what these foods can do. They can hijack you, and you can even hijack yourself as you're making your meals. Anyway, if you are, so you've got the natural endorphins that make everything, once they're concentrated, almost impossible to stop. One of the things that Dr. Niflin talked about, and I agree with this, was the clear head and the calm emotions that we feel without processed foods. Now, you may think, oh, come on, you're really stretching this. No, we're not. When I was, one of the things I talk about in this book, and maybe the impetus for writing the book, I just turned 70. I was 6 months away from turning 70, and I had been at that point about almost 2 years clean of an eating disorder, bulimia, which I had from the time which I developed when I was about 15 and a half, and fought my entire life until I was 67. That's ridiculous, but it's true, and I'm sorry to even have to admit it. And I now think about all of these things and understand a little bit more why, through therapy, through all kinds of medications, through thousands of dollars of specialists, couldn't stop for more than just a little while. Part of it is that when one eats a whole bunch of processed food, and what are you going to binge on? Who binges on broccoli? Who binges on apples? Who binges on carrots? Who binges on real food? When we do, we tend to binge on the foods that we cannot stop. Processed foods, um, uh, especially ultra processed foods, stuff that you can barely even recognize, loaded with the right combinations of those flavorings, or fast foods where the food is just dripping with oil. And that's part of the problem with eating out, or eating out a lot, and is that we don't know what they put in the foods. They put in things that we wouldn't eat in or create in our own homes, but that's a different story. Anyway, with infusions of that off and on, it the microbiome, which is our trillions, some say 40 trillion, some say 100 trillion microbes in our gut that really outnumber our body cells, and they eat, and what they metabolize is called short chain fatty acids that affect every organ in our body, and our blood vessels, and keep us healthy, really. But also in the gut, we produce our um, neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, etc. Well, when you're screwing with that, when you're eating all kinds of junk because you can't stop eating the French fries that are impossible to stop. Think of anything you can't stop. I know somebody well, she was telling me, I can't stop eating this particular thing. I'm not even going to go into that because she may hear this and she'll know I'm referring to her. I know exactly what she's talking about. There are certain things that we can't stop, and it's because we've become hijacked. Our pleasure centers pleasure center has become hijacked by our desire for that repeated high, and it's true, that addictive property and the high that we get. And I remember that. I remember after a binge, the head just being like, I was going to say almost ready to explode, but also in such a dulled state, as if I had smoked something, as if I had taken something, as if I had drunk something, that it just kind of was in another zone. I don't know why that seemed to be something that I would repeat again and again and think I couldn't get through life without. Now I think back of it and I think, oh my God, all that wasted time, all that wasted energy. But again, I was hooked and I didn't know where to stop, and I didn't know how to stop. Part of it was because it was the processed foods that kept calling me back, and I had nothing to use instead of that. That was part of it. The other thing is, and let me just make sure I'm covering everything I want to. Let me just back up a little bit and get a few things said that I want to say that I noted. Product formulations, and again, this is all on purpose, are created to make the product highly, highly palatable and therefore highly addictive. Also, product advertising. There are such a massive number of the advertising that we train our brain cells to the addiction to the degree that when we even think of a brand or we think of that food, we can almost taste it. And before you know it, we want it so badly, we'll get in the car and go out and get it. Be it a fried taco filled with who knows what they call their meat, to a hamburger that has, I mean, I'm just appalled at the stuff that they sell now that people want badly because the ads make them sound normal. And I don't know that they even talk about nutrition, but they make them sound desirable. Like my husband and I both will watch a commercial. We don't mean to. We usually fast forward through a commercial and they'll show a hamburger, and the hamburger is made with things that nobody should eat. A fried thing on top of another fried thing on top of a cheesy thing on top of a fatty thing dripping down your face. And anyway, that's all on purpose. So these associative cues will overcome our frontal lobe. And I didn't know this. She said that the controlling micro or neurotransmitters in our brain, which are 96% of them, will completely overtake our frontal lobe and overwhelm our ability to make logical decisions. Again, unless you have tools. I ended up finding tools, but until then, I couldn't do it. There's no excuse for that, but that's just the way it was. You would think, well, why can't we just make these things illegal? This high school kid even said that this was a perfect subject for social injustice. Why is it that we couldn't stop the purposeful use of food starting at a young age, and advertisement and subsidized money, subsidizing crops to make cheap fast food and to make cheap processed foods? Here's an example. She said it took 45 years after Congress acknowledged that tobacco was carcinogenic to be able to get that label they finally put on a cigarette package. 45 years. Why? They had a word for it. She had a word for it. And when I say she, I'm talking about Dr. Joan Nifland. And that word was log rolling. She said there were 8 senators that said, and they were in the Senate for decades, they said, we won't pass your bill. We won't pass any bill unless, we won't pass your bill unless you drop your portion of the bill or other bills that are regulating the tobacco companies. If you try to regulate the tobacco companies, we won't pass your legislation. So for 45 years, they were able to get the legislation on tobacco quelled in order to get anything else done in the Senate. You know what? That's obscene. That's just obscene. It's highway robbery of our health, and you would think the government would protect us, but there are too many special interests. So that's one of the reasons these things happen. She also said something else I thought was really interesting. She said most of the brain is comprised, and so listen to this video, you guys. Most of the brain is comprised of mirror neurons that make us conformers. In other words, we are heavily tribal. We people are heavily tribal. We want to be part of a group. We want to conform. We want to be part of what's happening. If it looks like the world around us is, I'm going to say this, and it sounds absurd, but I've been wondering what's going on, and this sort of explains it. If we think the rest of the world is in a certain state, the rest of the world is obese, it's more comfortable to be obese. If we think the rest of the world is sick, it's acceptable to be sick. Doesn't that sound awful? But think about it. Think of the commercials that we watch now. We, at night, again, we fast forward through commercials. They're either about food or fast foods, but you know what they're about now, and large numbers of them, about pills, about medications, about these medications that when they rattle really fast at the end of their description of what it's supposed to do for you, they rattle through what it could do to you, meaning just basically trash your body. They make it look almost popular to have type 2 diabetes, COPD, congestive pulmonary, COPD. Anyway, one ailment after another looks almost popular, so that we stop judging that, wait a minute, something is going really, really wrong right now in the health care, in the health of our nation. I watched this, and that was why I wrote this. because aging powerfully is about how to take your health back in your own hands. The part about the eating disorder was simply because I couldn't tell my later story. Here I am 70, healthier than ever. Why? Well, because I'm not hooked now on addictive foods, because I am not practicing an eating disorder, because I'm literally healthier than ever. Because of what? Because I changed my diet. And I'll get to that a little bit later, in a way that I'm clear-headed, emotionally stable, feel balanced, my skin's great. Everything changed because of some changes that included staying away from processed foods. I read any package. I'm not saying there are no packages in my cupboard. I'll look at the package, but I evaluate the oil, salt, and sugar. If I can't find anything that has no oil, salt, and sugar, I'll buy something that has the least amount, and it's going to be not ultra processed, possibly processed. For example, pasta is processed, but some pasta even has oil in it. What are some other spaghetti sauce? Some will have sugar, oil, and salt. Some will not. Find the least processed, and that's a processed food, but you find the least processed you can, because those are the foods that will make it easier for you to eat real food without feeling like you have to keep adding stuff to it, because it doesn't taste, it doesn't hijack you, it doesn't light up your pleasure centers in your brain the way the processed food does. It's meant to do that. It's meant to make everything else taste terrible. Or not terrible, but maybe not satisfy. When you transition to fewer processed foods, or none, and you start adding more and more real foods, you won't believe how good real food can taste. And I'll get to that later, but I just want to make sure that I've talked about that. So she said that we are deep wired to be conformists, and the social circles that we run in, including what we see around us as being the popular group, makes us directs us toward those behaviors and toward the things that make us more, I'll say, normal in that way and more acceptable in that way. Okay. So what do we do to, I'll call it, transition away from what we know to be real? And that is what unfortunately, what we can't control. It shouldn't be that the powers that be in our life, the people we trust, those who are supposed to take care of us, they have other interests, they have other controls on them, they have other lobbies on them that are going to make our health and our welfare not uppermost in their mind. As a matter of fact, possibly not at all in their minds. And that is awful, but that is the truth. The downstream effect of continuing doing what we're doing, eating processed, lots of it, ultra processed, any of it, fast foods, eating out all the time, where we're eating foods that are just much more delicious than anything we can eat at home. Why? Because they are also full of those things that make us not be able to stop. How do we, the downside of that is we become heavier, sicker, more full of chronic disease as a nation than we have ever been, and we are, and that every year we're becoming more and more sick. Children are diabetic, type 2. That never happened. Children are obese. That seldom happened. And they're going into illnesses that they never had. And we're doing that in earlier and earlier ages. So how do we move away from that? For one thing, we evaluate everything we eat. We look at and understand this to be real. And again, this is a college professor who wrote this textbook after 3 years of research, heavily researched. She's not a hysteric. She's not somebody that has a horse in the race. Anything to gain from this. other than to stop it where it is, if possible, right now. It is a social injustice. So we move away from those easy things, going through a drive-through, buying packaged things, eating those fries when we know they're not good for us. Forget that. Reject some of those things because we know what it's doing to us and we know where it's going to take us, and it's going to make it harder and harder to get healthy. The way we get healthy, and I promised you 5 steps to incorporate to redirect your behavior. First, eliminate all the ultra processed foods, the stuff that is unidentifiable, like frozen, packaged, well, meats, if you must, dishes that you can't even tell what's in them anymore. Most of that is not real food. It's stuff that was manufactured to look like food. Our microbiome, that almost an organ, 3 to 5 pounds of microbes in us that help our entire system balance, including our micro or our neurotransmitters, don't have any idea what to do with those foods. As a matter of fact, it makes the bad bugs grow to the exclusion of the ones that will take care of us the most. So get rid of the ultra. Just don't even buy it. Don't allow it in your home. The processed foods, and again, I have processed foods. I have rice spaghetti. I have a jar of organic spaghetti sauce. But if you look at the back of the jar, there's no sugar in that. And I love that. No oil in that. Better yet, I make my own spaghetti sauce, but sometimes there's just not time. And that's part of what you're probably thinking. Come on, Nan, I don't have time for this kind of stuff. All right, so forget the ultra processed, reduce the processed. Take control of your food by making more of it yourself. I'm so proud of. Somebody asked if I could make this shareable. This is going to be on the site as soon as I finish. So I think that's what you mean, and I believe, yes. I hope it's shareable. It better be. I wish you would share these things to everybody you know, including my message. I'm on a mission to create a movement of people. I'm 70. I want to go to 80, 90 or beyond. And I can do that if I take care of myself, but I want to take baby boomers and younger with me. And it's just not going to happen unless we get wise to these things. So share all of this if you can. Anyway, let me get back on track. Oh, make your food at home. I'm so proud of my daughter Jackie and Christine, her 1 year older sister, because they make most of their food at home. Jackie, I never thought Jackie cooked much. My goodness, she keeps sending me recipes. She brought over some things that she's made that have been remarkably tasty. And I put those things, for example, the ceviche. You're going to see my ceviche. Let's see, sofritos was just posted on my YouTube channel. My ceviche will be posted next week, I believe Monday or Tuesday. And it's ceviche without whitefish because I don't eat any animal product. It's ceviche made with palm hearts and just fabulous. I'm going to have to hurry because I'm keeping you too long. All right, make a lot of your food at home, because when you're judging and you say, I'm not going to put oil in this, I'm not going to put any sugar in this. If it needs a little sweetening, I'll throw in some date paste. And there's date paste recipe. Oh, nansimonsen.com is my website. nansimonsen.com. And there's date paste in that as well. Make your food. Look at what you're eating. Look at the resources. If you can go organic, go organic. Because the only thing that assures you, not completely, but very close, is that it's not being sprayed heavily. I was listening to another podcast of a nurse who works in Thailand at a cancer facility, basically a health facility that practices lifestyle medicine, which is what I am, a lifestyle medical health and lifestyle coach. And she was talking about how heavily pineapple is sprayed. Pineapple. You think, oh, that's going to be safe. You have to take the big peel off. Well, no, it's grown in ground with all kinds of heavy metals in it, and sprays and pesticides that go right down to the root and then right up again. So that's why I say if you can do organic, do it when you can. Eat whole foods. Get used to the taste of a carrot, a celery stalk, an apple, the tang of a kiwi, the silkiness of a banana. Eat real food. The more real food you eat, the more you'll get used to it. The less of the processed food, the more the real food will taste good for you. And then I'll add that other part to it. Not only whole foods, but plant-based as much as you can. 2.5 years ago, I decided, because I was getting sick, rheumatoid arthritis, I hurt everywhere, almost diabetic, I was pre-diabetic, high cholesterol, feeling like crud, looking awful. My skin was a different color. It was much more pallor. And I decided this is it. I was studying health, and I decided to go whole food plant-based. It took a while to transition, but that had a lot to do with my recovery from an eating disorder, because by eating real food, you can eat a lot, keep a lot of the oil out. It's not that I'm fat-free. I eat avocados, nuts, seeds, but I watch the quantity of those, but I don't even watch the quantity of anything that is a fruit, vegetable, tuber, meaning potatoes and sweet potatoes, and legumes, any kind of beans and any kind of grains. I eat as much as I want of that to be satisfied. Those are comfort foods. When you're always eating comfort foods, you don't need to binge. You don't need to think about that. You take a big fat sweet potato, you throw on some vegan sour cream, you throw on some steamed broccoli, and you've got an amazing meal. You eat it all, you're really full, and you're satisfied. That's how I learned to eat. That's when I was able to learn to ignore the urges to binge. And that was part of the second way I did it. One was whole food plant-based. The other was reading a book that was called, that is called Brain Over Binge by Katherine Hansen. Any of you who struggle with your food, any of you that have struggles with binges off and on, consider her book. It did it. That's what those two, within a 3-month period of time, after 55 years with an eating disorder, took care of it. And I'm so grateful. Life is so much better. There was a time I thought, no, I can't live without binging because I wouldn't know how to get through tough things in life. Man, oh man, was I wrong. I just had no idea. Control your environment. Control what you have in your home. AJ says all the time, Chef AJ, if it's in your house, it's in your mouth. And that is absolutely true. It's going to keep needling at you, and before you know it, it's going to be the beginning of overeating. And the more of that kind of thing that you don't even want around that you eat, the less of the really good food you will eat. Jackie started coming to our house and having some of our whole food plant-based. That's all we eat, is fruits and vegetables, grains and legumes, seeds and nuts. That's all we eat. And now she eats only that. She is now completely whole food plant-based, and she's glowing. So I think that's it, people. Let's see, it doesn't take that much time, and if you make ahead of time meal plan, you can actually save time. Cynthia Ortiz, you're right on, and it's true. You will learn if you transition to eating at home, leaving out the processed foods, with the intent of a purpose, a decision that you are going to be on the fast train to healthier, stronger habits that are going to take you into decades of health rather than ill health. Because, man, oh man, it may look popular, speaking of mirror neurons, to start to decline and be part of that in crowd, because everyone seems to be going in that direction. People, that's a slog. That's miserable. when you're living on procedures and pills and you hurt all over. That's no fun. I think I've covered everything I wanted to. Um, buy things that look like what they, oh yeah, buy things that look like what they looked like when they came out of the ground. And man, I'm all about that. Anyway, I don't see any questions. Please pass this on. I appreciate so much. What time is it? Oops. Yeah. I aim for 45 minutes to an hour, and sometimes they think I'll surprise them and be less, but I always seem to have lots to say, don't I? And I appreciate your coming on and even listening to it. Um, okay, people, I'm going to let you go now. I hope I didn't rant and rave too much. I hope I left you with something that oh, that you can use. I want to put, there were two things that I starred here. Um, the food mirror neurons need alternative communities. And maybe that's the other thing that helped me. After I got my health coach certification, I was hired by Lifestyle Medical here in Riverside. It's a general practice. And health with this medical practice isn't about giving pills. Oh, you've got high blood pressure, here's a pill. It's about, you've got high blood pressure. Let's look at what we can do to turn that around so you don't have to take pills. The 4 pillars of health: nutrition, whole food, plant-based, as close to that as possible; rest and relaxation, number 2; community, number 3. We need to be part of a tribe, and we need to know that we are cared for and we need to care back. And then movement, exercise. So I embraced all of that. That that community helped me stay focused on being part of that in crowd, the in crowd of health, rather than the maybe people that I knew that were kind of going downhill, and that seemed to be almost like something that was inevitable. Well, it's not. We tend to mirror to the people that are making good decisions or bad decisions simply because we want to be part of that. And control the messaging. Immerse yourself in changes that will help reprogram your brain. And this was from a scientist who, again, that's what she does. So, and teaches people to do it. So, people, that is a goodbye now. Okay, I appreciate you. I just love that you care and that you've come on and that you've spent this time with me. And I wish you a great day. Take good care and have a great day, because I know I'm going to. Bye bye.